Welcome to another show. It's your host, Danny Haiphong. Today we have a very special show, a great show, because we will be bringing on Scott Ritter in just a minute. But before we do, be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notifications bell, especially hit that like button to boost the stream and the algorithm. Now, announcement, everyone, censorship is incredibly intense right now here on YouTube. So be sure to go to the video description and follow me on Rockfin. All of my streams and now all of my video clips will be played on Rumble. So without further ado, everyone, let us introduce our guest tonight. It is Scott Ritter, former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer, UN weapons inspector, and now top-notch renowned geopolitical analyst, journalist, and much more. Hi, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you doing?
I am doing pretty well myself, and I almost forgot, but everyone be sure in just a second, because I need to now add it in, but be sure to go to the video description as well to find Scott's website. I'm putting that in, so everyone can go there and find his website, all the places you can support his work and find his articles and other works. Also in the video description, all the places you can find and support this work from Patreon, Substack, and more. But we can just get right started here, Scott. Let us get down to business. A lot has happened since the last time we spoke. So I wanted to talk to you about first this talk about an Israeli counterstrike on Iran. We've had Yoav Gallant skip a meeting in the United States, and there's been disagreements between Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant about coming to the United States, talking about this counterstrike. Gallant is saying that the strike is going to be lethal and precise, and that the Iranians are not going to know what hit them. Now, Vladimir Putin is also going to meet with Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian on October 11th, ostensibly to talk about bilateral relations, but also I am very sure, and I'm sure you are too, that are going to talk about this. So I'm curious your thoughts about what you believe might happen here, because Iran has made it very clear that any strike will be met with retaliation, and the talks about potential nuclear sites, oil sites, etc., that there will be equal, counters to those as well. So I'm curious of what you think may happen in these hours and days to come.
Well, first of all, I think that Israel is probably going to hit to attack Iran. There was a period of time up until this morning, or I guess yesterday, that I thought that Netanyahu might be playing a game of putting pressure on the Biden administration to get as many concessions out of the Biden administration as possible. Following through on his gambit back in July to come to the United States, talk to the United States Congress, wrap himself in the American flag. And the Biden administration was putting a pretty substantial package on the table, basically saying the sky's the limit on military equipment you'll never want, and we will back you till hell freezes over diplomatically. You'll never have to worry about anything out of the United Nations, and America will seek to quash anything that happens in the International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court. We've got your back. Just don't strike Iran. I think basically what we're saying is don't strike the critical nuclear sites or oil sites in Iran. Somehow, we keep saying it's okay for proportional, because here's the problem: we don't think Iran's going to follow through. We think that if Israel does a proportional response, that somehow we'll be able to convince Iran to do a proportional response to the proportional response and manage the escalation ladder. Because our goal being the United States, the Biden administration, is to prevent a major global crisis in the lead up to a critical national election, where the legacy of the Biden administration's on the ballot. Kamala Harris is, to be the successor of the Biden presidency, and one would think that the Biden administration wants her to win, and so that they are going to do that which is necessary to prevent the kind of crises that could derail the Harris election. One of the big crises that could do that would be a global economic meltdown triggered by energy insecurities, triggered by a regional conflict that put energy production facilities in the entire Middle East at risk. Iran has said that if its oil production sites are hit, it will take out the oil production sites of all the Middle East oil producing countries. That's that. They've also said that if you strike our nuclear facilities, this is an existential thing. And here's the story that I think most people are missing right now. Iran has said that if Israel attacks it, Iran is going to hit Israel with 1,000 missiles, 2,000 missiles. And they're going to take out over $100 billion of pre-designated infrastructure targets, which they've already identified. Basically, Iran is going to turn out the lights permanently in Israel, prevent Israel from having fresh running water, disrupt communications, energy distribution, energy production. Israel will be turned into returned to the Stone Age. That's Iran's promise. Somehow Israel and the United States believe Iran is bluffing because that represents an existential threat to Israel, and Israel's existential response is the Samson option, is nuclear weapons. The other thing is when people talk about striking nuclear facilities, understand that the other thing Iran has said is that if you do this, we're going nuclear, and they mean it. In fact, I think the big news here is that we've seen since May of this year 3 major statements made by very senior people within the Iranian government that suggest, or do more than suggest, state that the fatwa that is currently in place that prohibits Iran from developing weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear weapons, because it's inconsistent with the teachings of Islam, that fatwa could be changed if Islam itself is placed under threat, and Iran is an Islamic republic. Vilayat al-Faqih, the rule of the senior jurisprudence, is the methodology that they have embraced. It's a theocracy, and Israel's attacking nuclear infrastructure is deemed as an attack against the existential survival of the Islamic Republic, and therefore this fatwa would be reversed. Now, if you study declaratory policy, and that's basically what this is statements made by government officials that have the effect of saying this is our policy, void of in lieu of any official document being published. You don't make declaratory policy in a vacuum. It's usually accompanied by actions that give teeth to this policy. And so if Iran is going to say that the fatwa is going to be reversed, and if that's going to have any meaning, that means Iran needs to be on the cusp of being able to produce a nuclear weapon. The first statement made in this regard was made in May by a former Iranian foreign minister under Khatami, who is now a member of the Expediency Discernment Council, which is a very senior policy advisory committee mandated by Constitution, advises the supreme leader on critical issues. And this former foreign minister said that Iran will reconsider its nuclear policy. This fatwa could be reversed. Later on, I think last month, a very senior member of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command said the same thing. And he basically said, we will make nuclear weapons, that this fatwa will be reversed. Now you have the Iranian parliament actually saying, reverse the fatwa, and we must make nuclear weapons if Israel strikes us. All of this is linked because none of this happens without the supreme leader giving his blessing. You do not get to speak on behalf of the supreme leader in Iran. You don't get to question his fatwas, suggest they be changed publicly. So for these people to speak, a decision has been made, which means Iran has already had this conversation, and the decision has been made. If Iran is going to produce nuclear weapons, they can't do it in a manner which requires long lead time. It has to be able to be acted upon instantly. which means they front-loaded the system. That means that Iran has produced a nuclear device minus the fissile core. Now, they don't have, I know there's questions, people say, what about that nuclear weapons test that took place in Iran?
Right. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's a nuclear weapons test for a number of reasons. One, the depth of the explosion exceeds by order of magnitude the depth that you normally have these underground tests. Normally, you'll do it at 600, 800, maybe a kilometer down. This was, I think, 7.7 kilometers down or 7.7 miles down. It was far deeper. And just the logistics of that, to dig that borehole size enough to create the cavern, it has to be of a specific size, dimensions. You want to put, if you're going to do a test, you need to test things. That means you have to get the instruments down there. How do you get instruments down there and do this? And how do you do all that without it being detected? So I don't think so. Plus, the biggest problem is the diversion of the enriched uranium material. Right now, Iran has a significant stockpile of uranium hexafluoride, which is the feedstock to the centrifuges that enrich uranium. They have a significant stockpile of it enriched to 60%. The IAEA a while back said that this is enough for 3 to 5 bombs. There might even be more material now because Iran hasn't stopped the production of this. Iran has specially configured centrifuges that can turn that 60% into 96 to 98% in a very short period of time. These are modern centrifuges, highly efficient, and it'll be done almost instantly. And Iran, because they are producing uranium metal, they turn the enriched the 60% into uranium metal. They make metal plates, which is the fuel for the Tehran research reactor. So they can convert this into metal very easily. And once you convert uranium into metal, it doesn't take, the Iranians are pretty smart with calculations. You can do very simple calculations on how much uranium of a certain enrichment is required to go critical. And you do the calculations of a gun design. So gun design is basically you take a chunk of uranium, you remove a pit, and you fire it like a gun, boom, into it, and the impact into it causes it to go critical, and then you go fission. That was basically the bomb that was used. I think it was the Little Boy bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. It was a gun design, uranium gun design weapon, achieved 15 kilotons. And maybe the Iranians will be able to get 20, 25 kilotons out of a gun design. But they can take a gun design, put it on a warhead, and deliver that warhead to Israel. And I think right now Iran has the missiles capable of carrying this device has been built. It's not sophisticated. It has been built, and all that's needed is to insert the fissile material, and you've got a weapon. That decision's been made. They've already done it. They're front loaded. So here's the news flash. Iran is a nuclear weapons power. Now this changes everything. This changes absolutely everything, because now if Israel uses nuclear weapons, because to strike Iran's nuclear facilities, especially facilities like the Firdos facility, it is dug into a mountain, literally dug into a mountain. And you cannot take this out using conventional weapons, especially any that Israel has. In order to take this out, you will have to use nuclear weapons. This is why Donald Trump, and again, this is now I'm taking this on a different tangent, but Donald Trump recently made some comments about you want to hit the nuclear. That's the good stuff. That's what you want to do. Understand that when he said that, what is he saying? Because Donald Trump, again, most Americans don't reflect on this. When he was president, he changed America's nuclear posture and the American nuclear employment plan. And he allowed 2 new categories of weapons to be built, specifically for the purpose of taking out the Firdos underground nuclear facility in Iran. Because either we were going to have to hit Iran with a 700 kiloton weapon or 150 kiloton weapon, which is a huge thing, and the consequences of that you can't even. Or we use what we call a usable nuke. Two weapons were designed. One was a B-60, a variant of the B-61 gravity bomb that we have, and we built a B-61 that is a bunker buster, a penetrator. So it's able to burrow into the ground before it goes off and creates the over compression that can do it. This bomb specifically was designed and built for hitting Iran. And Donald Trump knows this because he's the one that put it into play and made it part of our nuclear employment plan. He's the one that knows that one of the option cards that the president will get when the suitcase is opened up is, to send B-2 bombers equipped with B-61 bombs to strike Firdos. He's the one who put it in place. And so when he says, we got to hit the nuclear, it's the good stuff, he knows what that means. It's a B-61, a B-2 bomber with a B-61 bomb hitting Firdos, probably 2 bombs because you always go for redundancy, or it's a W-76-2 low-yield nuclear weapon fired off of a Trident submarine that will again come in and hit. Again, designed to do exactly that, give the president options. So here we have the president of the United States actively saying to Israel, use nukes against Iran, because he knows that we can't destroy it without nukes. And so Israel would have to use nuclear weapons to destroy it. So he's encouraging Israel to use nuclear weapons against Iran. Iran is aware of this, which is why Iran has come out and said, we have nuclear weapons. Now, they haven't said that straight up, we have nuclear weapons, but I've worked with the Israelis back in the 1990s. I'm familiar with their analytical processes and how they extrapolate things, how they think into it. And I can guarantee you they have analysts right now who are saying the exact same thing. Mr. Prime Minister, Iran has nuclear weapons. And if we continue with this policy, Iran will use these nuclear weapons against us. Our calculations are that 3 to 5, 15 to 20 kiloton devices will eliminate Israel. And as Iran proved in Operation True Promise 2, they can deliver the missiles that will hit any part in Israel they want to, anytime they want to hit it, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. If you attack Iran, Mr. President, we are destroying Israel forever. That's the discussions that are taking place right now. So we are at a very serious moment in world history right now, where Israel is playing stupid games. Benjamin Netanyahu is literally gambling the lives of over 100 million people, because that will be the casualties. I know Israel's 12 million, but when you talk about the damage that'll take place, over 100 million people will be killed by a nuclear conflict between Israel and Iran. And and this is what we're talking about, but nobody's talking about it right now. We have a president joking about hitting the nuclear. We have a prime minister who's calling the bluff of the United States, and we know we call the bluff because, again, Biden put some really good stuff on the table. But just yesterday, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, I believe it was yesterday, it might have been this morning, I don't know, I'm getting tired, but she basically said, the United States is supporting 2 resolutions. One calling for the immediate provision of humanitarian aid, the other one calling for a ceasefire, that the United States has blocked. She is blocked. She is on record saying these are horrible resolutions. America could never support this stuff. And suddenly she has to eat crow and read her instructions from the State Department. Why? Because Joe Biden had a 30-minute conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu, reading him the Riot Act, and Netanyahu told him to pound sand. He said, no, we are attacking. And so Biden now is trying to put pressure on Israel, demonstrating that the United States won't have your back. Now Israel has to calculate this, but Netanyahu is desperate right now. He's failing in Gaza. I mean, how many times is Israel going to have to go in and clean out Gaza? I mean, they now have to go into the northern part of Gaza again. Why? Because Hamas hasn't been defeated. They're there. They're resisting. They're killing Israelis. They're firing rockets into Israel. This is over a year into this war, and Israel hasn't defeated Hamas. They will never defeat Hamas. And in Hezbollah right now, Israel is making some propaganda videos on the periphery, but every time they penetrate deep, they get hit hard by Hezbollah. They get, they're getting knocked out. And now Iran, if they bomb Iran, it is the end of Israel. Literally, Israel will be turned into the Stone Age, and this will trigger an Israeli nuclear response, which will trigger an Iranian nuclear response. That's where we're at right now. It's no joke time. This is end of the world kind of stuff, and yet we're still playing stupid games.
Yeah, and maybe before we transition, just your final comment on this contrast, because we've had, as you said, Joe Biden and the Biden administration attempt in these recent weeks, especially in the last couple of days, try to speak with the Israeli side. Lots of tensions between Netanyahu and Biden, Gallant and Biden, and now it seems like there's also, I don't think this is a coincidence that Vladimir Putin is taking time to go to Turkmenistan to meet with the Iranian president in the eve of what is coming from Israel. What do you see as the differences here between, what Russia and Vladimir Putin may be saying and communicating to Iran versus how the United States has gone about this? Because you called, what the United States is doing and what Israel is doing too as stupid games because of the consequences. But now you also have Vladimir Putin coming in and talking to the Iranian president. I'm just curious about what you think might be said and how it might differ from how the United States is handling all of this with the Israeli side.
Well, I think Russia and Iran are moving towards a strategic relationship that has teeth. A key problem for Russia and Iran is Russia's long-standing policies regarding the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. And Russia has historically supported sanctioning of Iran because of its so-called violations of the safeguards agreement, etc. But Russia signed on as part of the Joint Comprehensive Program or Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal. Trump pulled out of it. America is not part of it. Europe has not complied with it, and Iran has, gradually moved away from it because the actual agreement allows them to do so. I can't remember the Article 24 and maybe Article 36 or something like that. If one side is in non-compliance, the other side can stop adhering until the other side comes in. This was actually something the United States negotiated as part of the sanctions kickback. You see, we put it in there because we thought that Iran would be the ones cheating, and therefore, what we said, if Iran cheats, then we can, snap back our sanctions. But it's bit us because we withdrew. Europe refuses to engage economically. And so it's Iran that is doing the snapback. And their snapback is actually to back out of the additional protocols and things that were put in place by the agreement. Russia has gradually shifted its stance because it recognizes that the United States and NATO and the European Union have been using the IAEA and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to hamstring nations like North Korea and Iran. They saw how the United States abused the IAEA in Iraq, creating a false sense of, later in 2003 of a resurgent, a revived Iraqi nuclear program that didn't exist, and holding Iraq accountable to things that were fabricated. We've seen Russia basically tell the world, the United Nations and the world, that with regard to North Korea, which pulled out of the NPT and has a viable nuclear weapons program, that Russia is no longer going to hold North Korea accountable for that. That the day of trying to get North Korea to back away and disarm is over. Russia accepts North Korea as a nuclear power. I think the discussion that Putin and Iran are going to have is about Iran's potential withdrawal from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and how Russia and China and BRICS will deal with this. What are the consequences of this? What needs to happen to trigger this? What steps Iran needs to take so that there isn't, because you have to be careful. We have a BRICS meeting coming up. That Russia's put a lot of time and effort into it. And one of the key aspects of the BRICS, reason for existence is to reject the rules-based international order and implement a law-based international order derived from an appreciation of international law. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is a treaty that serves as one of the foundations of international law. And so Iran can't just willy-nilly pull out of this. And so I think one of the conversations that Russia is going to have with Iran is how to manage this crisis, what can be done, to avoid this, because I think the ideal for Russia would be to keep Iran in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. But Russia understands the pressure that Iran's being put under. And if this is going to become an existential issue, like it had been with North Korea, then Russia will, of course, I believe, advise Iran that if it's going to withdraw, these are the steps that need to be taken so that Russia can, prevent a backlash that harms Iran, that harms Russia, that harms BRICS. and it comes down to a question of timing as well. But the wild card in there is Israel's actions. Iran has promised an instant response if Israel attacks. Basically, they're saying that if Israel sends aircraft to attack Iran, by the time those airplanes return to Israel, there won't be in Israel. That's how quick their response is going to be. So again, very, very dangerous times, very disconcerting, events that are taking place. But I think that's the direction that Putin is going to be talking about. This is about the future of Iran's strategic relationship with Russia and Russia's strategic relationship with Iran. I think you're going to see it get closer. And I think you're going to see that Russia is going to back Iran on this nuclear issue, but it has to be done properly. It can't just be a willy-nilly knee-jerk thing. That's not how the Russians work. The Russians do everything deliberately, and there has to be, legality attached to everything. So I think Russia will work with Iran on the best way for Iran to pull out of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty and declare its new status as a nuclear power.
Yes, indeed. Those are great insights, Scott. Now, I wanted to transition, and I believe this is a good place to transition to the overall picture, because you have been talking about what Israel has been doing to Lebanon, its bombardment campaign, its aerial campaign, which has escalated even as we speak. Now, there have been strikes on central Beirut, so they're going deep into Beirut in an attempt to assassinate another Hezbollah leader, this time a negotiator. Failed to do this, but killed upwards of 20 plus people now and counting in that strike. I wanted to ask you, though, about this situation with the ground invasion, because with Israel, it seems that, yes, Israel can bomb and bomb and bomb, but according to recent reports, Israel has not been able to penetrate up to 2 kilometers into southern Lebanon. And that now it's been days and days, more than a couple weeks now, where they have been planning and now attempting to invade. And you just wrote an article for Consortium News on the fall of Israel, and I wanted you to talk about your thesis in that article in the context of this, what seems to be a flailing and failing ground invasion, and how it relates, this failure, how it relates to Israel's overall picture as it pertains to its future. A lot of confidence when it comes to striking Iran. It's going to surprise Iran. Yoav Galan says they're going to surprise and shock Iran and damage Iran. It'll be so devastating. Yet this ground invasion isn't going so well. So I'm curious about this contradiction, your opinion on it, given what you've recently written in Consortium News.
Well, I'm somebody who has said all along that, logically speaking, Israel should never have gone in a big way in Gaza, that it was never going to end well for them. And unfortunately, history has proven me correct on this. We're more than a year in, and Gaza is not defeated. I think I pointed out earlier the Hamas is reemerging in northern in Gaza. I mean, Israel had built a corridor in the middle of Gaza, splitting it. The goal was to basically totally pacify the north, where the rocket attacks were primarily coming from, that threatened Ashkelon and other things. Hamas is back there coming out of the ground, firing rockets, and Israel will never defeat them. They don't understand what Hamas has accomplished here. And I've also said that I didn't think Israel was going to go into Lebanon in a large way, because the outcome is inevitable. Israel will not win. Well, the IDF has announced they've gone in with 20,000 troops. That's a significant number of troops. But mainly these are troops operating on the immediate border area. As you said, the deepest penetration is under 2 kilometers. As they try to probe in deeper, they're getting hit. They're walking into ambushes. They're running into the teeth of the Hezbollah defenses. And this is a war that Israel wasn't prepared to fight when, if there was no other diversions with a fresh army. But now they're bringing an army that's been worn down by more than a year's worth of fighting. that's exhausted physically. The logistics are screwed up because they don't have the spare parts, required to sustain this effort. And they're backing it up with a lot of airstrikes and everything. They use some cute tricks, assassinating leadership, blowing up pagers that caused momentary disruption. But as both Hezbollah and Iran have said, that whatever Israel accomplished with these trick plays, and I call them trick plays because I'd like to point out that teams don't win championships with trick plays. You win championships with fundamentals. And the fundamentals of war is that Israel will not prevail in southern Lebanon. The Hezbollah has had 18 years to prepare for this very thing. Nothing Israel's doing is taking Hezbollah by surprise. Nothing. Hezbollah knows the kind of weapon systems Israel has. They know the effects. They've made preparations for this, and they're going to lure Israel in and kill them. Remember the tunnels that Hamas has. Hezbollah has been digging similar tunnels. The tunnels will be used when the time is right. Bring the Israelis in deep enough, cut them off, kill them, and you'll find that there's far more tunnels that reach deeper inside Israel than Israel knows. Israel, found a handful of them and are blowing them up and talking about them, but there's more. There's always more because they've had 18 years to prepare. You don't think in 18 years all they did is put out 3 tunnels that crossed into the, right across the border. No, they've put tunnels that go in deeper. And just take a look at the scope and scale of some of the tunnels that existed in Gaza that Israel has found. One of them, basically, you could drive a tank all the way up through right to the border. That's how big the tunnel was. I would imagine that Hezbollah has tunnels of that size all over the place. But the ground war is not going to go well for Israel here. They have an air war, but what they're doing in the air war is it's a repeat of Gaza. Now they're treating Beirut as an extension of Gaza. It's collective punishment, and it will just further alienate Israel from the international community. And here's the key. Now we're getting into the defeat. Israel is going to be a lot like the United States in Vietnam. I mean, study the war in Vietnam. We won just about every tactical engagement there was. I mean, of course, there's a couple times, platoon overrun here, company overrun there. But generally speaking, when the Marines went out and hook and jab with the NVA, we won. We killed them. They withdrew, and then we withdrew from the hill that we just captured, and the NVA came back, and we had to go fight for that hill all over again. We had to fight for the valley all over again. That's the way, and that's what's happening to Israel and Gaza right now. They come in, they take a piece of terrain, they think they have it. They don't, because they don't know what's going on underneath. They withdraw, Hamas comes back, and you have to come back and fight for the same terrain all over again. It's the 4th or 5th time that Israel's given up this territory, and they pay a price in blood and equipment each time. And that's going to happen to them in Lebanon as well. Clausewitz wrote, "War is an extension of politics by other means." I mean, that's sort of a synopsis of a longer phrase. But what that means is that if we try to evaluate a conflict from military engagements alone, we're missing the big picture. This conflict Israel has set certain goals and objectives. For instance, with Hamas, Israel says that the goal is the physical destruction of Hamas as a resistance force, meaning that Israel want to make sure Hamas will never again be able to launch an attack like they did on October 7th. And the destruction of Hamas as a political force. That means that Hamas will not play any role in the governing of whatever Palestinian entity exists when this conflict is over. Israel has failed on both accounts. Hamas is powerful. Sinwar is the leader. He hasn't been killed. And the resistance fighters, are not only continuing the resistance, but they've recouped many of their losses. One of the things about bombing civilian populations, especially in a guerrilla type conflict, is for every terrorist you kill, you end up killing a whole bunch of innocent civilians, which means that you create new terrorists, new resistance fighters who come out. And Hamas has, I think, claimed that they've brought in 3,000 recruits during this time. And they say, well, what about training? Well, the resistance fighters in Gaza. Sinwar talks about children of the camp. These are all children of the camp. Every one of the fighters he has is a child of camp. What that means is that you were born and raised in Gaza. You know Gaza like the back of your hand. And that's the key. They know Gaza like the back of their hand. The Israelis don't. They're coming in. It's foreign territory, and they're never going to win. That's the same thing in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah spent 18 years preparing for this. They've walked every inch of that ground. They have everything pre-designated. They have their ambushes set up, and Israel is just going to walk into one trap after another trap after another trap. It'll go on forever. Israel has said that their goal and objective now with Hezbollah is to eliminate it as a political entity and as a military entity. They've altered that. It was simply to get them behind the Litani River. They're not going to be physically able to do that, but now they've said no. We want to eliminate them. Well, they're not going to do that. So Israel's set unattainable goals. What's happened to Israel in setting these unattainable goals? Israel's destroying itself, and this is why the article is about the end of Israel. Economically, Israel is a basket case. In September of 2023, September 9th, Joe Biden was in New Delhi, India, where he announced this new initiative called the Middle East European Economic Corridor. This is a grand plan designed to defeat the Chinese Belts and Roads Initiative, to serve as a counter to the Suez Canal route, to serve as a counter to Russia's St. Petersburg, to the Persian Gulf rail network. And the key to this was Israel. Israel is the heart, because it goes from India to the United Arab Emirates, up then through rail lines that connect it to Saudi Arabia, into Jordan, into Israel, to Haifa, and then from Haifa by container ship to a port in Greece. Benjamin Netanyahu that same day put out a press release. He said, "This is the most important thing that's happened to Israel ever." He said, "This will change the face of the Middle East and Israel forever." He said, "This is what makes Israel the greatest economic potential of the region. Israel will become the heartbeat of region, a new reformed and revitalized regional economy." He was so happy about this. This is what Israel's always been waiting for, the chance to grow up into a mature nation at peace with its neighbors, dominating its neighbors economically, being invited to the table, having their voice listened to and obeyed by Arabs. This was it. This was the greater Israel that Netanyahu had always been dreaming of. After October 7th, this initiative is dead in the water. It's just not going to happen. I'll tell you the main reason why is that a key aspect of this initiative was that Israel had to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. They were on the cusp of doing this. Literally, they were very close to this normalization, part of the Abrams Accords. Saudi Arabia now has said that while they haven't shut the door on normalization, they will not normalize relations with Israel until which time there's a Palestinian state and its capital's in Jerusalem. Israel has said under Netanyahu that this will never happen. So if Israel says it's never going to happen, then relations will never be normalized, which means the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor is never going to happen. The greatest thing ever to happen to Israel will never happen. And this is just the beginning of the bad economic news, because now Israel will never have a chance to become this powerhouse that it wanted to become. Instead, the reality sets in. Last year, Israel took a $67 billion economic hit. This doesn't include the cost of the war. This is just loss of tourism, unemployment, loss of jobs, lack of investment. Nobody's investing in Israel right now because it's a horrible place to invest. Israel's become a place that many people don't want to live in. It's funny, I wrote this article, then almost immediately the BBC played an interview with somebody who made the same arguments. He said that nobody wants to raise children here. Nobody wants to. This isn't where your families come. This isn't where you come to retire. This isn't the land of milk and honey. This is a place where every day you have to worry about missiles raining down on you. People are fleeing their homes. It's completely unstable from an economic standpoint, and that translates into societal instability. There's a significant percentage of Israelis who hold dual passports, and it's not just the physical holding of the passport, but the fact that the vast majority of the Israelis come from Europe, and the way European law is that if you can trace your lineage back to, I think, through your parents to your grandparents, that you can claim citizenship and get your passport. And we're starting to see Israelis flee Israel. And when they start to flee in significant numbers, you get a demographic shift that's not in favor of a greater Israel. It's in favor of not just a two-state solution, but a one-state solution called Palestine. And this is the reality. Israel is no longer a viable nation state. They're holding things together through military force and intimidation. But at some point in time, Israel has to find a way to become economically viable. It's impossible. The Houthi have carried out an effective economic blockade of Israel's second largest port, the port of Eilat in the south. No ships are coming through, no economic activity. Haifa is now under attack. That's the most important port, and that's going to shut down. The world's going to stop doing business with Israel because it's been recognized internationally as an apartheid state that's carrying out genocide in violation of international law. And slowly but surely, Israel is going to become this isolated non-entity. Nobody's going to want to do business with it. People are going to flee. And again, you get the demographics to drop to a certain point, and the Israeli state ceases to exist just on its own volition. So this is the reality of losing this conflict. Israel's in the process of not just losing the military aspect of this war, but losing the political aspect. It's not Hamas and Hezbollah that's being threatened with being eliminated as entities. It's the state of Israel. Israel is an unsustainable entity given the current circumstances, and there's no reason to believe that the current circumstances are going to change to the betterment of Israel. They can't defeat Hamas. They can't defeat Hezbollah. And if they try to attack Iran, they will be eliminated.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think all those points are important to take into account given what is going on right now in Lebanon. There's this a reality that is very striking. You've mentioned that Israel is living by the sword and is now dying or perishing by the sword. I've heard you say this, and I think it's so interesting that just one year after it ignited this genocidal campaign in Gaza that, as you said, has not been successful, at least if we look at its stated aims with regard to Hamas and the Palestinian resistance. But now it feels like an even bigger quagmire is opening up that is very similar, I think, in many ways to your comparison to Vietnam, where now they are fighting an even stronger, more organized, and more well-equipped guerrilla force that also has a modicum of political power. And I wanted to get to this, actually, Scott, because the Wall Street Journal has reported that, and this is what's I think is very important for people to understand, that the United States is seeing Israel's ground invasion and overall campaign in Lebanon as an opportunity to displace and unseat, aka regime change, Hezbollah in Lebanon. So I wanted to ask you about this in the context of what you were saying in terms of how Israel is expanding this field of conflict, but doing so not in an advantageous position, actually quite the opposite. I'm curious on your thoughts on this.
Well, it's interesting that one of the go-to moves that Israel's considering right now as part of the Hezbollah displacement is to breathe life back into what was called the Southern Lebanese Army, SLA. Israel created this after their invasion in 1982 and their occupation of southern Lebanon. They created the Southern Lebanese Army. And it was a horrible group of disaffected Muslims, Christians who raped, pillaged, murdered. They had no support, and Hezbollah defeated them and kicked Israel out in 2000. And then the SLA ceased to exist. But Israel's going back to that model, which means that's all they know. The United States has a policy that treats Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, and we have been trying for some time now by enacting sanctions that target Lebanon and sanctioning Hezbollah to split Hezbollah out of the Lebanese body politic. But it hasn't worked. Hezbollah has actually become a viable political party, one of the most powerful political forces in Lebanon. It is part of the Lebanese government. And so what we're saying is that, when we say we want to, push Hezbollah aside, we're declaring war against Lebanon. And that's the difference in the past. You see, in the past, when Israel occupied Lebanon, Hezbollah was not considered an extension of Lebanon. Hezbollah was a resistance group primarily in the south of Lebanon, but it was at odds with the Lebanese government and with other militias. The Amal militia, Hezbollah was derived from it, but there were some clashes there. Definitely the Sunni Arabs, the Druze, the Christians, they were all opposed to Hezbollah. And many of them collaborated with the Israelis to take on Hezbollah, or take on the Shia. Today, the dynamic has changed. What we've seen before Israel went into southern Lebanon were the various factions making it clear that they stood with Hezbollah because they stood with Lebanon, and they viewed Hezbollah as part of Lebanon. What we're trying to do is recreate the 1980s and 1990s in Lebanon. We're trying to go back to a time where we had influence, we had levers that we could control. But I think Lebanon has moved past that. I think it's a mistake to believe that Lebanon will revert to, the kind of divisions that existed that could be exploited, that we were exploiting, Israel sought to exploit in the 1980s, 1990s. I think Hezbollah now is part of Lebanon, and that you can't separate the two without destroying Lebanon. That's what Israel's trying to do. Understand what's happening here. This bombardment of Lebanon is, again, I hope I pronounce it. I think it's Dahwa, the name of the southern Beirut. I don't know if you ever saw the meme. I used to say, have trouble pronouncing the Bab el Mandeb.
Yeah, I remember. It's been on this show, on record on this show, that you've had. Yeah, I mean, it's not
and
easy.
they showed this meme that was hilarious because it showed me just screwing it up, and finally I said it right, and they're like, "Whoa, yay!" And so I know that I'm screwing up the name, and I don't mean to be humorous here, but sometimes you have to have humor, or else you get depressed, because what's happening to Lebanon is depressing. I have friends there. I know everybody does,
Yeah,
but
it's horrible.
I met this family. They came to New York in June, and a wonderful family, and they came to, remember when I used to talk about doing the Central Park, reviving the 1982 Central Park demonstration, the million-person march, and I really was trying to do that, but I ran into a reality check which said New York City was never going to allow this to happen. And so we moved away to, trying to create waging peace documentaries and all that. But I guess I forgot to make the public announcement, because when they heard it the first time, the wife, a wonderful lady, she went to her husband and said, "We're taking vacation in June. We're going to New York City, and we are going to be part of this demonstration." And they did all the plans. They bought the tickets. They got everything locked up. And she, her husband, and her daughter flew to New York City. And then she's like, "Well, there's no meeting. There's no rally. What happened?" And she contacted me through Jeff Norman, my co-host on Ask the Inspector, and said, "Hey, we're here." And I said, "Well, I'll meet with you." And so I went down to New York City and had a wonderful lunch with them and talked with them and got to know them. And they're just fantastic people, really salt of the earth type of people. They live in Beirut. And every day, I hear the bombing, I send them a message, just to making sure they're okay, because I'm very worried about them. And I know there's people that have loved ones there, and friends and family, and they're worried about them. And unfortunately, many thousands of them have died, and many thousands more are going to die, because Israel doesn't give a damn about these people. Israel is carrying out a policy of collective punishment. And Israel knows it's going to get away with it because it's already slaughtered Palestinians, committed genocide, and it's gotten away with it. Nobody's doing anything to stop them. So Israel's now focused on bombing Lebanon, and the goal is to inflict so much pain on the Lebanese people that they rise up and reject Hezbollah. But I have a feeling that it's going to backfire, that the people aren't going to rise up against Hezbollah because they consider Hezbollah to be part of the Lebanese social and political fabric. And this will just harden the resolve of Lebanese against Israel and against the United States. It's a horrific gamble on the part of the United States to use Israeli genocide, because this is the genocide of the Lebanese people. It is. They're treated as a subhuman class, and they're being murdered. with no consequence. And America has attached itself to this policy because somehow we think through this genocide we can achieve a policy objective vis-a-vis Hezbollah. It's a sickening reality of American policy that, I mean, everybody says that they know this about America, and we should know because we did it in Iraq. We killed millions. We did it in Afghanistan, killed millions. We don't care. And we'll do it again in Lebanon, either directly with our own bombs. We've done that in the past, or indirectly using Israel as a proxy. But we'll kill as many as necessary to achieve this. We don't shed tears over dead Arabs. We don't shed tears over dead brown people. That's just a harsh reality of it. Although I have to say that this family was whiter than I am, so when I say dead brown people, it's just stupid. I mean, we don't even know what we're talking about when we talk about Arabs and the Lebanese and the Levant and the wonderful mix of, she's a Russian. She's from Lugansk. She married her husband, who is from Beirut, but he's a Christian, I believe, and I'm sure there's French blood and there might be other blood, and it's just all this wonderful mix. That's what makes Lebanon such a wonderfully diverse country, is this blend of Mediterranean cultures and peoples and internationalism. And now they're being bombed by this hate-filled genocidal maniac named Benjamin Netanyahu, and Netanyahu is being supported in this by the ignorant Americans who are so indifferent to Arab suffering that we're willing to let Israel commit genocide of the Lebanese people so we can attain an unattainable objective with Hezbollah. It's not going to work. America will fail on this like we failed on everything. This is just an open challenge I have for anybody. And if you see an answer in there, put it up there, and I'd love to hear it. I challenge anybody in your audience right now to tell me one thing America's done since the end of the Cold War that's been beneficial for mankind. One policy initiative, because all I see is us bombing Serbia, expanding NATO, taking out Muammar Gaddafi, allowing Libya to collapse, illegal war of aggression against Iraq and Saddam Hussein. I challenge anybody to give me one thing, just one, that America's done that says, oh, America cares about the world. We don't. All we do is death and destruction. We have become literally the global pariah. We are the worst nation in the world when it comes to treating the world. And it's not just the big ticket stuff. What have we said about Congo? What about the cobalt and all the other rare minerals that are pulled out of the ground in the Congo by little children who rush down there with their hands, and they do this, poisoning their bodies, and they're going to die a miserable death with half the life expectancy? What about the millions of Congolese who have died in the ongoing fighting that takes place, which we facilitate because we want that kind of chaos so that we can gain access to these materials which we need for our cell phones? America has done that. That's what we do. That's what we're all about. We have done nothing good. We have a military-industrial complex that can only exist when there are constant state of crises in the world. So we facilitate the crises. And when it might sound like a little policy thing that the stupid Georgetown postgraduate people talk about in their little seminars, but each one of these policy things about generating crisis results in dead human beings, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them, and it's all America's fault. We haven't done anything that's good, nothing. Everything we've done is bad. And I hate to say that as an American, but it's the truth. There's not one single foreign policy initiative that we've undertaken that was done for the benefit of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, as you were speaking about Lebanon in particular in your context, I was thinking even just about the dangers that journalists that we know, I can't pronounce good Arabic either, so I won't butcher her name, but Haradi Francis, who's been on my show more than a few times, I worry about if she's going to be alive the next time that I check social media. Laith Maroof, who I'm going to have on this show very soon, a friend of Garland Nixon as well. I'm worried that he's not going to be around to come on and talk about what's going on the ground. We can go on and on and on. So, this is a very real development that includes very real people, and I think you just summed up U.S. foreign policy very well there, Scott, which gets me
Well,
to
we
my
have
last.
one more journalist we should talk about, and that's the
Yes.
Gray Zone journalist that was
Yes,
arrested by
Jeremy
Israel.
Lafredo, right? Oh my,
Yeah.
yeah, he was arrested, I believe in Tel Aviv or somewhere in Israel proper, we could call it. And yeah, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about him.
Well, it's curious because to be honest, when I first heard the story, they said, well, he's reporting. He was trying to find out information about um, the effectiveness of the Iranian missile attack. And I went, I can support a lot of journalism, but if it looks like battle damage assessment, smells like battle damage assessment, it might be perceived as battle damage assessment by the Israelis and therefore espionage. But then Max Blumenthal, who is always on the ball, came out and said the reporting he was doing was the exact same reporting that an NPR reporter did with the full approval of the Israeli government. The same reporting, that he wasn't trying to do anything new. It was just the same thing. And so this is a targeted thing because I believe that NPR has drank the Israeli Kool-Aid, whereas Max Blumenthal and the Gray Zone haven't. And so I think this was a targeted attack by Israel against an American journalist who is not playing the game the way Israel wants it to play. And the American government is silent on this issue.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I watched the video that they did on this. It was about, he was traveling around trying to find the sites that the missiles hit. And the reason, I mean, a big reason why someone like Jeremy and the Gray Zone have to do this is because Israel has a gag order. There is no one that is allowed to do this inside of Israel or anyone coming into Israel to do such a thing. So there's a huge need to to actually get this information so that people can have a bigger understanding of what's going on. But of course, Israel has come down very hard, and so we all need to make sure we go to the Gray Zone and support any effort to reverse this horrific violation of journalistic and,
And
of
I,
course,
and I
civil
wanted
liberties.
to say one other thing too. I know I'm not supposed to read the comments. My wife tells me not to, and I'm sure everybody would appreciate it if I don't, but I do read them. And there was a comment in there that the person was taking umbrage at. He said Israel's bombing everybody, killing everybody. Stop talking about Israel crumbling. Um, I'd like to remind this individual that the United States bombed the living dog poop out of the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese in 1972.
Yeah.
And then we provided the ability in 73, 74 to do the same thing. South Vietnam fell in 1975. Why? Because it ain't about the dropping of the bombs, pal. You're
Exactly.
looking at the wrong damn thing. It's
Yep.
about the politics of it. And we lost Vietnam politically, not because they beat us on the ground. So if you're sitting there focusing on Israel dropping bombs and Israel killing 6-year-old girls named Hin Rajab and all this, and you're saying that proves Israel's winning, you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Exactly.
That's the truth. Stop getting fixated on tactical stuff and start pulling back and looking at the bigger picture. It ain't about the bombs. It's about the larger political impact of the bombs. If you don't think Israel's losing, tell me then about the great Israeli economy. Stop telling me about Israel's bombs. Okay, we know that America gives them bombs, and we know that we give them the planes. We know they can drop them. They've proved that every day. Talk to me about the economy. How do they reverse the $67 billion hit they took last year? That's going to be even greater this year. How do you get Israeli tourism back up? 80 to 90% drop in tourism because nobody wants to visit a nation at war. How do you do that, my friend? How do you do it? And I know I'm not supposed to attack people that comment, but sometimes I see comments that just make my blood boil because there's a level of ignorance in there that is disturbing. The whole purpose of a podcast like this is to put out a lot of data out there to get people to think. And you apparently the person who put that comment in there is not thinking. You just are somebody who doesn't even care what we're saying. We might as well not be speaking because you have a preordained notion of what's going on, and that's what you did. But anyways, sorry that hit me the wrong way.
No. I mean, I think the example of Vietnam is so prescient. We can look at Afghanistan, even 2021. I mean, we can look at so many examples of how technological, so-called technological prowess, we could call it, military might, the ability to destroy, to bomb, to kill. History shows that that isn't enough to win, quote unquote, or to maintain, especially unjust, oppressive, and murderous regimes like, for example, the occupation of Vietnam, or the occupation of Afghanistan, or as we're seeing now, the occupation of the Levant, the occupation of Palestine, facilitated, of course, by the United States and conducted by Israel. I think we're just seeing this in real time. I mean, we just talked about it, Scott. We just talked about Hezbollah. How is Hezbollah able to continue its operations, strengthen its operation? It's had, I can't even name how many leaders, not even including Saeed Hassan Nasrallah, who have been wiped off the face of the earth by Israel in the last couple of weeks, and yet Hezbollah is beating the ground invasion. There's a reason why Israel has 20,000 troops ready to go, and they haven't moved. They haven't moved an inch in real terms. So I think, Scott, you're exactly right. But this gets into my final question, actually, about what's happening in West Asia on this subject. Is, when we're talking about what's going on here, both Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, I wanted to ask you, you said in your article in Consortium News that what happened on October 7, 2023, and now we are now in the second year of this, it changed the world forever. And I wanted you to talk not just about Israel, but also U.S. influence, domination, power in West Asia, because it seems to me that a lot of the fears that the United States has about Israel's conduct also has to do with the United States' own fears about losing this region. And we can just look at other parts of the world that especially China and Russia have made such headway in order to develop real relationships and move the world in a different direction. It seems to me that there's a lot of fear about the U.S. having this foothold here in Israel's conduct. Potentially, it's supposed to help. Biden said it in the 1980s himself. It's supposed to be helpful. Now it seems like it's backfiring deeply. I'm wondering your thoughts about it.
Yeah, look, I mean, let's go to the beginning. 2007, Vladimir Putin went to the Munich International Security Conference and gave his famous speech about the emergence of multipolarity, challenging the unipolar world. At that time, Russia pretty much stood alone. China was still, focused on, working on being a sound economic partner for the United States. Things hadn't got quite as bad as it's going to get. But Russia was saying the inevitable, that America's policies are inconsistent with the reality of life in the modern world, that you can't invade countries as America did in Iraq in total violation of international law, wage a war of aggression and not pay a consequence in terms of your reputation abroad. You can't sanction people willy-nilly and expect the dollar to be retained as the global reserve currency. And what happened is that this led to, I think, in 2010 or 2009, the creation of BRICS, again, primarily a Russian-driven initiative to try and gather the global South. Remember, Russia was kicked out of the G8, I think, in 2008. And so, Russia was like, okay, well, we'll create our own club. And they created BRIC. And then in 2010, I think they expanded, became BRICS. But BRICS was always this sort of informal gathering. They came together, and then it was hard to get traction on BRICS because the strength of the United States was manifest. This rules-based international order had insinuated itself throughout the entire, including Russia. Remember, even though we're talking about 2008, 2009, 2010, the United States, Western Europe still had important economic interaction with Russia, major economic interaction. A significant percentage of the Russian economy was thoroughly woven into the West. You couldn't separate the two. That was one of Putin's, big headaches is, how do you push for Russian independence when such a significant part of your population believes that the West is the way to go. And you can't divorce from the West because Russia is, after all, a democracy. Putin was winning elections with 58%, 62%. And part of the vote was the continued support of about 20, 30% of Russians who supported Putin because of the stability factor and everything. But, they were linked to the West. Putin couldn't just divorce from the West and lose those voters who jumped to the opposition. Now Putin's out of power. So he had to play that game. And so you're slow. Plus China wasn't ready. India and China had problems. It wasn't ready for BRICS to mature. And then 2022 came along, the Ukraine conflict, and the United States once again screwed this up. They tried to turn the world against Russia through economic sanctions, and it backfired. And suddenly BRICS had more relevance than ever because the United States seized, several $100 billion of Russian sovereign funds. And everybody's going, whoa, 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 you can't do that. That's against the law. Plus, if you can do that to Russia, you can do it to us. China and India were looking at that saying, this isn't good. Everybody said this isn't good. And then they tried to do the sanctioning of Russia's lifeblood, energy, backfired. And what happened is suddenly BRICS became very relevant. In 2022, Putin floated the idea of a alternative reserve currency, and everybody poo-pooed it. Nah, it's that's just Russia, dreaming again. Really, 2 years later, it's probably going to happen. At the BRICS summit in Kazan, they're going to weaponize an actual alternative to the dollar as a global currency. It might not be a singular currency, it might be a basket of currencies, I don't know, but the United States through its actions gave impetus to something that people said couldn't be considered because of the inconvenience of it. Nobody wants to lose the convenience of the dollar, but America made the dollar inconvenient overnight, and now they compelled this action. In 2023, BRICS expanded, something BRICS had always hesitated. They brought in South Africa, but then, when Turkey applied in 2019, they said, nah, it's a little premature. We're not in the expansion mode yet. Suddenly in 2023, they are in the expansion mode. And who did they bring in? I mean, Saudi Arabia Saudi Arabia still, they didn't fully integrate, but that may happen this year. Iran, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Ethiopia, Argentina was invited, then they withdrew. I'm sure if Milley is booted as president down the road, Argentina will reconsider that. But, so now expansion. And now what's happening this year is they're going to organize it with, systems, with infrastructure, with, the full-time, full-time committees that will meet and discuss throughout the year to coordinate policy, institutionalize BRICS, make it a grown-up institution on par with the G7 and the G20. All of this happened overnight. BRICS was supposed to unroll over the course of a decade, and even then, people are like, no one's going to leave the convenience of the rules-based international order. Can BRICS ever come up with an alternative to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund? Yeah, they are right now, because the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are now seen as an extension of American policy that the world's rejecting. The expansion of BRICS happened because the United States was losing the fight with the global South. And the main reason wasn't just Ukraine. The main reason is Israel. And in 2023, after October 7th, this became a huge problem for the United States, because ambassadors were writing back to the State Department saying, hey, our unequivocal support of Israel, we've lost the global South. They're not with us. Any hope we had of slowing down BRICS by keeping the global South gravitating towards us is over. We've lost them. And this is the biggest part of what Israel has done to itself, because not only is Israel will never again be viewed as the invincible military. Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran have laid waste to that idea. Israel will have a deadly military, but it's no longer invincible. They die just like everybody else. And Israel will never be what it wanted to be through the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor, the major economic hub for the heartbeat of the Middle East. That's over. Israel is now what it really is, a pathetic little tiny strip of territory populated by a murderous people that are totally at odds with civilized life. And that's going to change the middle. Iran is emerging, I mean, as a nuclear power. This is a game changer that's going to require action. But the most important thing is that the world has shifted away from Israel and the United States. And this isn't just about a regional shift. This is a global shift. What America has done with the Russians in Ukraine and what America has done in supporting Israel's ongoing genocide against the Palestinians and now the Lebanese has alienated the world against America. The world has turned on America. And you're going to see that the transition of power that everybody's been talking, even the Biden administration prior to Ukraine, prior to Israel, said we're seeing a competition between what the Biden administration calls democratic rule and the autocratic rule. They've talked about that. But then they also talk about the transition to a multipolar world. The Biden administration in their 2022 National Security Strategy document speaks about the inevitability of multipolarity, and America needs to adjust to that. But we were always trying to slow that down and manage this transition in a way that would be favorable to the United States. What's happening now is absolute sprint to multipolarity. And as soon as Russia institutionalizes BRICS, if they're able to pull it off in Kazan, that's the death knell of American unilateralism. The world will now gravitate to this new institution that respects sovereignty, respects the opinions of individual nations, and you're going to just see the wholesale rejection of the United States in the global South. This is how the world has changed forever, and a major driving factor is America's support of Israel, the unquestioned support of Israel in this ongoing conflict. The world rejects it. You don't see anybody outside of America's tight circle of friends siding with Israel on this one. The world recognizes Israel as a murderous genocide apartheid regime. That will never change. Israel will never recover from this, and America will never recover the loss of confidence the world has in American leadership because we have supported, without question, this genocidal maniac named Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, and you talk a lot about, Scott, the plan, this, the Abraham Accords was supposed to facilitate this integration economic project, the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. That is gone. That is completely out of the question. It will never be completed. But even, I think, broader, what that reflects is something that doesn't get talked about enough still, especially in regards to Israel. Israel's destruction is the U.S.'s destruction. It's the U.S. is fueling that. And that destruction is now being viewed, I believe, in the entire region and now the world as all that the United States has to offer. And when that's all that the United States has to offer, well, why then would for example, I mean, in the beginning of the formation of something like the Belt and Road Initiative and even BRICS, there were talks of, well, if the United States and Europe, if they want to be partisans, if they want to cooperate, and maybe if they even want to join, then we can be open on with that as long as they are going to behave accordingly and treat us as equals. But you don't hear that at all anymore. Actually, all you hear is how to build an alternative from this. And I believe a lot of that is because all that we are left in this world when it comes to how the U.S. does any kind of policy in West Asia and beyond is destruction. Any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, destruction comes in different ways. We focus on the obvious, which is the bombs. And as I said earlier, Dwight D. Eisenhower warned America back in 1961 in his farewell address about the dangers of the military-industrial complex. And we, the people of the United States, failed to heed that warning. And today we find ourselves totally captured by the military-industrial complex. It defines how we operate internally, domestically, and how we operate with the world. We are a nation that only knows war. That's all we know. We don't do diplomacy. We don't do big peace deals. Everything is predicated on war. Look at Camp David. This great peace agreement. What's the key aspects of the Camp David agreement? Finding equity in the distribution of America's military aid between Egypt and Israel, finding a balance. Military aid becomes the heart of this. That tells you that there's something fundamentally wrong. In order to maintain stability in the region, we have to provide Egypt and Israel with equitable amounts of military weaponry. You look at the Chinese negotiation between Saudi Arabia and Iran, the rapprochement there. Where's the secret military annex there? Where's China saying, in order for this peace to be, we have to give so many missiles to Saudi Arabia, so many missiles to Iran? That ain't any part of it. It's about peace, stability, economic prosperity. That's the way the world should work. America can't work that way. But we do things otherwise, and we're getting called out on it now. We can use Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, as an example of this. The Republic of Georgia is a nation that very much wants to be part of the West. They're in the Southern Caucasus. Many people consider them to be part of Asia, Eurasian at the best, but definitely not Europe. But the Georgians say, no, we're Europe. We want to be part of Europe. We want to be part of the European Union, and we want to be part of NATO. They want to be part of the European Union, NATO, so much that they made it part of their constitution. That constitutionally, the Georgian government must work for European Union membership and NATO membership. One would think that America would be happy with that. Say, hey, that's cool. And now all we have to do to make this happen is do right by the Georgian people. That's all. All we have to do is manage this problem to do right by the Georgian people. But to do right by the Georgian people, you sort of have to keep them out of a war. In 2008, the popular history in the United States, the John McCain version of history in the United States, is that Vladimir Putin brutally invaded Georgia in 2008, in the summer of 2008. Well, Vladimir Putin wasn't the president of Russia at that time. Dmitry Medvedev was. Vladimir Putin was the prime minister, and he doesn't have the decision-making ability about war. But what we can say is in the summer of 2008, leading up to that invasion, Dmitry Medvedev was meeting with Saakashvili, the president of Georgia, on a regular basis to discuss the conditions in which the breakaway Republic of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, who broke away after civil wars in 1992, 1993, could be returned to Georgian sovereignty. What would it take to bring that back, make that happen? And remember that the Georgians had absorbed 300,000 internally displaced persons from Abkhazia, and a couple tens of thousands of internally displaced people from South Ossetia. These are refugees living within their own borders who need to go home. My wife's family's from Sukhumi, the capital of Abkhazia. They are refugees. Her parents are now passed, but they want to go home. That's their home. And Medvedev was working with Saakashvili to make that happen when Condoleezza Rice flew in and said, we aren't giving you this training, this NATO training and this support for nothing. Stop talking to Medvedev. If you want Abkhazia back, if you want South Ossetia back, you know what to do. And so Saakashvili invaded in August, and then he lost, and that reversed everything. Now, whether this narrative has been, that the Russians started this war, the Russians were brutally this, that, the other thing. Russian peacekeepers were asleep in their barracks outside Sinkvali, the capital of South Ossetia, when Georgian troops came down and attacked them, killing several Russian peacekeepers. The Russians were able to send troops through the tunnels and defeat the Georgian army in a short 5-day conflict. But the Georgians have always, in the United States and the West, the narrative is that Russia brutally invaded Georgia. That's not what happened. And now we have the Georgian government, the Georgian Dream government, saying the truth. And they are apologizing to South Ossetia for starting the war. They say the blame is with Saakashvili, who yielded to the pressure from the United States to start this war. That is the truth. That is the reality. But that's not the worst of it. Yes, that's part of the war fighting stuff that we do. We suck as a country. We really do. We're horrible people. We don't know peace. We don't know how to promote peace. Even when we work with the Georgians in a non-violent way, it's done to achieve through soft power what we can't achieve through hard power. What I mean by that is, we provide a tremendous amount of aid to Georgia. My daughter was a Peace Corps volunteer in Georgia for 2.5 years. She worked in Georgia. And this was supposed to be a great thing. It was a great thing, except that she realized that at the end, it's soft power, that they're a front for the United States Agency for International Development, which is a front for the National Endowment for Democracy, which is a front for the 3 various entities that comprise the National Endowment for Democracy, which is a front for the CIA to achieve, using soft power, regime change objectives that otherwise would be done through hard power, coups, etc. This is the reality. We're not doing it to help them. We're doing it to help us to achieve an outcome in Georgia. And what is the outcome we want? We want Georgia to be openly hostile to Russia. And lately, we've been putting pressure on Georgia to open up a second front against Russia to divert attention away from the defeat that's taking place in Ukraine. Fortunately, the Georgian Dream government has seen through this and has counterattacked. One of the ways they counterattacked to pass a law, which is sort of the Foreign Agent Registration Act, saying that if you are a non-governmental entity, that organization that takes 20% or more funding from foreign powers, you have to declare that funding and register as a foreign agent. Well, this immediately ended the hopes and dreams of the United States, because what we had been doing with our funding of non-governmental organizations was trying to undermine Georgia Dream, trying to remove that government, which was elected by the vast majority of the Georgian people in free and fair elections, remove them from power. And the way you do that is you come in and you start working at the grassroots level. You start off by saying we want civic empowerment of everybody. That's code for pushing policies that run afoul of, say, Georgia's traditional family values. So you're promoting homosexuality, you're promoting LGBTQ, openly promoting it, and in order to receive the money, you have to go in there. So you create these movements that challenge the social structure of Georgia, traditional family values, to be disruptive. And then you come in and you say, now we need to create vehicles of empowerment through elections. So we fund local elections, which are designed now to take these newly empowered civil changes that we've created and project them into political viability. And they did that. And then what you do is you come in and you say, well, now we need to control the flow of information. You see, we need to have counter disinformation, misinformation, because what you're basically saying is that anybody who speaks out against what we're doing is committing disinformation and misinformation, and we have to counter that. So we put in programs for that. And then the final thing, of course, is to push for elections that push the Georgia Dream out of party out of power. They saw through that. They countered it. They passed a law. These NGOs have been wiped out. And now with the United States, the great friends of Georgia, we say, well, you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. And so now we're sanctioning them. And the European Union saying you can't be part of the European Union as long as doing this, and NATO saying we're not training with you anymore. And so what we've done is proven that everything we claimed to be doing to help Georgia was all a lie, that we don't want to help Georgia. We don't care about Georgian sovereignty. We don't care about Georgian democracy. And this is repeated over and over and over again. You see Bangladesh, you see other countries starting to call out American non-governmental organizations and recognize them for the poison pill that they are. This is how America operates. Even when we pretend to be doing good for you, we're not. It's a facade. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing that's sent in to carry out soft power coup d'etats, to remove local sovereignty and replace it with governments that are 100% controlled by the United States. That's how we operate. The world has seen through it, and it is the end of it. That is the end of how America has sought to dominate the world through the rules-based international order.
That was an incredible synopsis, Scott, that just has so much suffering attached to it, so much just lives that have been taken, and so many just instances of cruelty and violations of international law. We can go on and on and on. That just underscores how and why there is such a big move to create an alternative to this. And it truly is something that I think gives many of us hope as we look onward. And I think earlier, as you were saying, when you were very unhappy with one of the commenters, one of the folks in the chat today, who was very fixated, and in some ways I understand this, fixated on the cruelty, on the destruction, on the fact that we have been witnessing for over a year this open air internet, free information. We can see every single day on our phones what is going on, how just horrific these crimes are against humanity that the US and Israel are committing. But at the same time, if that's all we focus on, we miss what people are doing to stop this, what people are doing to build a better world out of this. And if we miss that, then we basically miss the majority of the world, and we end up reinforcing this isolation that you just pointed to, this isolation that the US is finding itself in as this empire that is now in steep decline. But Scott, I've kept you a while, and I think I was going to ask you about Ukraine, but I think it might be more appropriate just to take a few questions from viewers. Today was actually a record. I don't know what it is about today, or it's the topic, or the fact that people just find us to be a great team. But today was a record breaker in terms of viewers. So everyone, thanks so much for viewing. So Scott, I wanted to.
I should stop criticizing. I apologize.
No. It's okay. We should be open to criticism here on this program. But Scott, so I wanted that. This is actually a good question. I just want to thank everyone for giving a super chat. And at the end, I'll pull them up. But first, Taharka asks, why can't Russia just give Iran nuclear weapons and weapons in general?
Russia is, again, believe it or not, Russia is a law-abiding nation. Russia takes treaties very seriously. This is why you have to, remember when the United States said that Russia was violating the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, it was a 100% lie. And we did everything to prevent Russia from being able to, defend against the allegations. Russia presented the weapons in question for inspection. They were ready to work out verification methodologies, but we had a narrative that we wanted to stick to, so we stuck to it, and then we withdrew from the treaty because we never intended to abide by the treaty. Within a week after leaving the treaty, we started testing missiles that were in violation of the treaty. Had the treaty been in effect, you don't begin tests 1 week later unless you began preparations for those tests years in advance. So we had been planning to withdraw from that treaty for years, and we just were making up lies to do it. That's how we treat treaties. Russia treats treaties very seriously, and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is a treaty that Russia views as one of the cornerstones of, continued civilization. And so they can't just give Iran nuclear weapons. That would be in violation of everything that Russia stands for under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. If Iran is to acquire nuclear weapons, I think Russia is going to talk to them about the legal way to go about doing that. That is to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, make your announcement and things that there's legal steps that need to be taken to make this happen. And Iran at least has to go through the motion to do that. Now they may be able to claim, emergency extingencies, given the fact that if Israel starts attacking it, that they have no choice but to accelerate. But there will have to be an announcement about Iran's withdrawal from the NPT. That has that, and I think that's what Russia's talking to about, is the legal framework for this transition that's inevitable now, because Iran has no choice but to build its own nuclear weapons capability to counter, the irresponsible actions of both the United States and Israel.
Indeed, and we have another, I think, very related question here. Perhaps the second one is the most relevant, but you can definitely answer both, Scott. But what I'm most interested in is CE's question: why does the U.S. seem hesitant to escalate with Iran? Is the U.S. a paper tiger?
Well, I wouldn't call the U.S. a paper tiger. We can knock the crap out of any place in the world we want to. Excuse my language, but this notion. Ask the Vietnamese, were we a paper tiger? Ask the families of the more than millions of Vietnamese that we killed. Is that what a paper tiger does? Kill millions? Ask the Iraqis if we're a paper tiger. We wiped the map with their army. Ask the Taliban, are we a paper tiger? Asked the Taliban in Sangin what was it like to go up against the Marines. They said, we don't like shooting at the Marines because once we fire, they come running at us. We're not a paper tiger. We're fully capable of killing people and killing people in large numbers very effectively. The problem is, as I talked about earlier, that's not how you win a war. We can do a hell of a lot of damage to Iran, but they can do a hell of a lot of damage to us. Iran has ballistic missile capabilities that it's been preparing for some time now, all of which can reach American bases in the region. Iran just put the United States on notice that if we use certain critical bases, one in Kuwait, one in the United Arab Emirates, to support any Israeli attack against Iran, that Iran will attack these bases and destroy these bases. And there's nothing we can do to defend these bases. That's the reality. When Donald Trump was threatening to attack Iran in response to the shooting down of the Global Hawk drone, $110 million piece of equipment, no lives were lost. He wanted to take out the air defense sites that did this. One of the estimates that was put together is that you could kill up to 150 Iranians, but that wasn't the point. Even though Trump made an issue out of that, the point was that would be the United States attacking Iranian soil. And that's a red line for Iran, which would have required Iran to respond, which led to an escalation that would eventually have the Iranians shut down the Strait of Hormuz and destroy American bases in the region. And then the United States is left struggling how to respond. Now, we can hit Iran with long-range strike capabilities, but Iran will be able to ride that out. Eventually, we will either get tired and have to back down, or we'll have to step up. To step up means now that we have to build up military power in the region that then can be projected into Iran. During the Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, we projected 750,000 Americans into the region, but we did that because we could land, put ships into ports where we weren't being attacked, friendly ports that received us, used their stevedores to offload our stuff. We had infrastructure to move it inland, establish it. Our troops could fly in on aircraft landing in airfields that weren't under attack. And so we were able to build up these forces with this artificial sense of accomplishment. If we try to do that in a war with Iran, understand that those ports will be attacked, that will be damaged. The airfields will be attacked. Planes aren't going to be able to land uncontested. And eventually we're going to have to project power into Iran, which means we're going to have to seize Iranian ports. That's a major military operation. As General Berger, when he became Commandant of the Marine Corps a couple of years ago, he redid the Commandant's guidance. And what he said is the Marine Corps has to stop operating under using legacy amphibious warfare operation methodologies that go back to World War II. You don't get to have the amphibious ships line off on the coast and launch the landing force, and off come the Marines in their Amtraks, and they go this way, and the LSTs come in, and the LCACs, and we all move in on the landing shore, and we cross the line of fire, and then boom, there we are. No, that's World War II stuff. We don't get to do that anymore, because if we put our ships off there, the missiles come in and hit the ships. Fact is, the missiles hit the ships as they're approaching, and we got all our Marines on one ship now, and so they hit it, and there goes a battalion landing team, and you hit another one, there goes a regiment. And Berger said, we can't do this anymore. This is not how, and he actually said that we can't, we being the Marine Corps, can't accomplish the mission that we've said to the Commander-in-Chief we can accomplish in the National Security Strategy that talked about force projection in littoral regions. So, this doesn't mean you're a paper tiger. It just means that the world has changed. The United States, as Trump was told, we can build up, the hundreds of thousands of troops that would be needed. It may take months, it may take years, but we can do that. And then we can project ourselves into Iran and enter into a multi-year war with Iran that'll be very difficult, and there's no guaranteed outcome because they're fighting on internal lines of communications. We have long logistics. They can disrupt the regional logistics. And Trump made the proper decision not to do it, called it off. This is why we don't talk about going to war with Iran right now, because the calculations that Trump had to factor into making that decision in the aftermath of the shooting down of the Global Hawk are the same calculations. If anything, things have gotten worse for the United States, not better, because Iran's ballistic missile capabilities have become, even greater than before. Greater capabilities. They can reach out and touch us further away. They have missiles that we can't shoot down. We proved that. We had our fleet lined up to protect Israel, and we fired 12 SM-3s I don't know. Did we get all 12 hits? But not enough to stop the attack. You know what's important about the 12 SM-3 number? You know what the annual production rate of SM-3s is for the United States? 12. So we blew off 1 year's production of SM-3s defending Israel, and we didn't defend Israel. They got hit. And so this is the reality. It's not that we're a paper tiger. I think people need to, if you think we're a paper tiger, go up against a Marine Corps rifle company. They'll kill you. There's not a rifle company in the world that can go up against a Marine. Mano a mano, the Marines will win, hands down. We're just outstanding warriors with an extreme lethality built into everything we do. But then as you take it, build it up, there's only 26,000 Marine Corps infantrymen. That's it. We don't have more than that. We got 180 some odd thousand Marines, but only 26,000 Marine Corps infantrymen. And infantry die in combat in large numbers. And eventually we run out of Marine infantry rifle companies, because war is really about a game of attrition. It's not that the Marines are a paper tiger. They'll kill you, but they die too. And eventually they'll die in sufficient numbers where they can't be replaced. And then we lose, not because we're a paper tiger, but because we can't sustain this war of attrition. The realities of modern warfare kick in. But we will do a lot of damage before we die. So those people who think America's a paper tiger, no, Iran will suffer beyond belief if they go to war with America. They may win the war, but they will suffer beyond belief. Paper tigers don't make countries suffer beyond belief. So I think you have to understand that America has tremendous amount of lethality, but so does the rest of the world. And we don't have the ability to win these sustained fights. We're not organized to do that. We haven't been since the end of the Cold War. During the Cold War, you didn't want to mess with us. We could project millions of troops anywhere in the world. Today, our military is not designed to do that. We used to be designed to fight and win 2.5 wars. Today, we can't even win 1 war. Not because we're a paper tiger, just because the way we're configured, we thought that this would be over. We never thought there'd be large-scale ground combat in Europe again. In the Middle East, we just thought it would be a series of low-intensity conflicts that we can manage. To fight Iran is a full-scale total war effort against a very developed nation with very advanced military capabilities. We can't do that right now.
No, and I've always said this. I've been saying that. I mean, I've been thinking about this for years and saying it for years to anyone who's asked when it comes to Iran or even a country bigger than Iran like China. It's like going up against the will of an entire population or nearly the entire population with far better technology than other past efforts like in Vietnam or even in Afghanistan. I mean, you're talking about an incredibly destructive, inherently just a completely just suicidal move, really, if you want to try it. And I think it gets to that point, Scott, that you were making that made me think about that it's an empire outstretched. Just you can have 26,000 plus U.S. Marines who are well trained and ready to shed blood, but when you have an empire that's 800 plus military bases spread all across the world, and you even have entire regions for in command centers, CENTCOM, AFRICOM, on and on and on. It gets quite difficult to get embroiled, as we've seen in what's happened. I mean, even Russia, they won't call the United States a paper tiger. They won't say U.S. and NATO are paper tigers. Actually, all they say is whatever NATO supplies to Ukraine is not going to make a difference on the battlefield. It doesn't mean that people are not dying. People are definitely dying. Russians are dying. You even have reports, Scott, I don't know if you've seen them recently, that 1,000 Russians a day are dying on the front lines. It seems to me that's a little hard to believe, but that's the reports now. But even so, even though Russia is making advances and progressing and will win this war, it doesn't mean that there hasn't been massive damage caused. The same goes for what's happening here. I think it's even more explosive and just devastating in the Middle East and in West Asia, where sure, yes, Israel will lose. Yes, the U.S. will lose. They will lose their influence. They will perhaps, in the case of Israel, lose its entire existence. But we will see hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions by the time we're done with this, perish in the wake of this, because Israel has weapons. Israel has the ability to use those weapons. The U.S. has the ability to hit targets and we've seen that. Any closing thoughts on this question?
I'll just point out in Vietnam, we lost 58,000 dead over the course of 10 years, and we lost that war. We killed millions of Vietnamese. So anybody who's looking at casualty rates and think that somehow that dictates victory, you don't understand the nature of war. And so I think we focus on the wrong thing. That's why I don't like the term paper tiger, because it focuses on the wrong thing. We weren't a paper tiger in Vietnam, but we lost that war. We weren't a paper tiger in Iraq, but we lost that war. We weren't a paper tiger in Afghanistan, but we lost that war. We're not a paper tiger in Ukraine, but we're losing that conflict by proxy. And if we fight Iran, we're not a paper tiger, but we're going to lose that war too, because war is an extension of politics by other means, and the politics of America is inherently corrupt. They're corrupt in terms of how we interface with the world. We've discussed that. There's nothing positive America brings to the table. Nothing. Everything we do is negative. Everything we do is detrimental to the world out there. And so if you need to have a sound political foundation upon which you're basing your military actions before you can actually win, we come in with corrupted political foundation. So whatever we do militarily is doomed from the very start. We can't win a war because any war we try to fight, we're the bad guys. There's no good wars out there for us to fight. There's nothing we're doing that's good. You can try, go look at Afghanistan. No matter how much we tried to put lipstick on that pig, everything we did in Afghanistan was bad for Afghanistan. That's why we lost. Iraq, democracy, Saddam Hussein, weapons of mass destruction. It's all a lie. It's about global domination, regional domination. We didn't occupy Iraq to be their friends. We occupied Iraq because we hate Iraq. And eventually we had to withdraw. We came back in 2014 because of ISIS, and we're going to have to withdraw again. Why? Because we're the bad guys. Because we're not viewed as the good guys. Go ask the Iraqi parliament. The Americans, the good guys today in Iraq? No, they hate us. And eventually we're going to have to leave. The same thing in Syria. There's, even in Europe where, American troops are, there's just growing resentment because, we bring nothing but bad. Look at this involvement in Ukraine has destroyed the European economy. And Europeans aren't stupid. They're starting to put two and two together about Nord Stream. Finally, the Danish have come out and said, yeah, it was 2 American ships, not some drama in a sailboat with 6 drunken Ukrainians and a beautiful, hot Ukrainian doctor. It makes a great movie. I can't wait to see the James Bond version of it.
All right.
But, the reality is, it was the United States Navy working with the CIA and British and Norwegian assets that destroyed the Nord Stream pipelines on orders from President Joe Biden. That's the reality. Europe's waking up to the fact that America is the enemy. America is bad. America is evil. And as an American, this saddens me because we have the potential to do good. We really do have the potential to do good. I was a child during the Cold War, and like I said, that included Vietnam and other things. But I remember living in Turkey, even after we sanctioned Turkey in 1974 because they invaded Cyprus. The Turkish people viewed the American presence in a positive light. I could drive through Turkey as an American, go into a village, and the Korean War veterans came out, put on their old uniforms, and came out and shook your hand. And they loved. In Germany, growing up in Germany in the late 1970s, the Germans loved us, and we got along well with them. They viewed us as a force of good. Now, maybe that was a perception issue. Maybe we had better information warfare at the time, but there was a time when you traveled with an American passport and it was a positive thing. You were received well. Today, it's just an absolute negative. Absolute negative. We have become the bad people. We are the worst nation in the world today. And that's because all we bring is death and destruction. You heard of the Midas touch? And everybody, it's always funny when people go, oh, you have the Midas touch. Everything you turn turns to gold. Right. And you go, well, that's good. But that it actually was a curse. Because what happens when you touch a living entity and it turns to gold? It dies.
That's true.
America is the nation with the Midas touch. We go around saying that we're going to touch everything and it's going to turn to gold for us. But for you, you're dead. And that's the thing. America today has the Midas
Wow.
curse. So we go around and everything we touch dies, even though we try to turn it to gold for us.
Wow. Isn't that such a, I think that's an incredible metaphor for American exceptionalism and the narratives that have been constructed around all these wars that we talk about. Scott, is it's the Midas touch. Well, that's what nations around the world, that's what the global South is told. The U.S. will come. Once they touch you, everything's going to turn to gold. But
You're
actually,
dead.
you will be turned to gold. Actually, more like stone, and you might be living in the Stone Age afterward. But one last question before I get to it, Scott. You can answer it as quickly as you want. I just wanted to a note on the term paper tiger. A lot of people associate it with Mao Zedong, and he talked about the U.S. being a paper tiger during this period directly after the Chinese Revolution into the Korean War, which many people may not know all happened within about a 4-year span. But I think it's important to look at perspectives. For us in the United States, I see it as, we would not want to campaign, if we're campaigning for peace, around this notion of the U.S. being a paper tiger, because a lot of people, like we've seen in comments, I've gotten these comments a lot. Hey, you talk about the U.S., Israel losing a lot, but look at all the destruction. Well, we need to highlight all of this destruction and talk about this overall pathway toward defeat. But it doesn't mean that the United States is not very powerful. And it also doesn't mean that China wasn't working. China was fighting the United States directly during the Korean War too. It doesn't mean you can watch incredible Chinese films like the Battle of Lake Changjin, and you can see what the Chinese were doing to plan against American attacks, because those American attacks on Chinese volunteers, they are very deadly. They lost 200,000 plus volunteers during a very short amount of time, but they won. So to use the term paper tiger from the Chinese perspective,
they didn't win. Korea was a draw.
Right. Well,
Mm.
they pushed the Yalu River. They pushed the U.S.
No, they pushed it back, right? But the final
right.
year of that
The final
war,
thing was a stalemate, right?
fought in the mountains, was just a bloody war of attrition.
Oh yeah,
That broke the back
exactly.
of both sides, and we basically punched each other into exhaustion.
Totally.
And
And
said,
now we
"We're
have
done."
the situation that we're in
Yeah.
today, where the Korean Peninsula. But I would see the paper tiger more as on the Chinese side, as like a motivator, because you've been around the world, Scott. There's a lot of fervor. People want to feel confident in their resistance, and I would see the use of the paper tiger from a Chinese perspective back in those times as that.
But I think the Chinese didn't view paper tiger as meaning America couldn't do harm.
Right. No, exactly. That's what I mean.
It was the opposite. They were basically saying that, America will not be able to defeat
Exactly.
the Chinese Revolution.
That's exactly
That's what they're saying, that America can't change this. So paper tiger, I think, had more of a political context to it.
Exactly.
Than the military.
And less utility for our purposes in terms of campaigning for peace here. But Scott, this is the final question. If you have any, as brief as you want, and I can pull up other super chats as well as you're speaking.
Is there any hope of Japan to stop being a lapdog of America?
Well, I thought it said Jordan at first. I thought the viewer first put Jordan CE, but it changed to Japan. I mean, I guess they're not so disconnected, but we can stick with Japan here.
And beware of what you ask for. Let's go back and just review history for a little bit. Japan lost World War II and was occupied by the United States. And the United States, while occupying, rewrote Japan's constitution. And there's an important part of the Japanese constitution, Article 9, in which Japan forswears war. It says we're not going to have a military. We're not going to do any of this stuff. Well, we couldn't sustain it. Of course, the Korean War came up, and so we allowed Japan to create what they called the Japanese Self-Defense Force, ostensibly an extension of the Japanese police, but very militarized. And since that time, Japan's been struggling with Article 9. What does Article 9 mean? And the United States has been pushing Japan to separate itself from Article 9, because we want to use Japan's tremendous industrial potential to convert it into military potential, so that the rising sun, is once again, playing a role in the Pacific, but always under American control. See, that's the American hubris. We want to create a Japanese monster, but we want to control this Japanese monster. In 2014, I believe, the Shinzo Abe got the parliament to redefine Article 9 to allow Japan to act in defense of allies. So now this meant that Japan isn't just defending itself, but now they can project defense in defense of allies. This is done primarily for Taiwan, saying that Japan can come to the aid of Taiwan if China were to attack. 2 years ago, 2022, Japan reinterpreted defense to mean that they can counter strike. So it's not just defending from an attack, but if they are attacked, they were going to acquire the weapons to allow them to counter strike, to fire Tomahawk cruise missiles in, etc. And now they have a new prime minister, former defense minister under Shinzo Abe, who is a militarist, and he is looking for Japan to become an even stronger military. He wants to basically break free of Article 9. And here's the thing. Article 9 is still in place. The Japanese public has not, they haven't shown the will to separate, but what's happening is that they want to retain Article 9, but they don't want to abide by it. They want it on the books, but they're not going to challenge as long as some superficial explanations put in that shows that they're trying to abide by it. They are. This new prime minister wants to increase Japan's military power, but he doesn't want it to be under the control of the United States. That's why I said beware of what you ask for, because being America's lapdog meant that America would effectively control Japan's military ambitions. If you want Japan to stop being America's lapdog, that means that they're going to break away from Article 9 and become an independent actor. And I just say that history does tend to repeat itself. And do you really want the rising sun to be once again sailing the Pacific, trying to impose Japanese will? I know the South Koreans aren't too happy about that. I know the Taiwanese, people of Formosa, aren't too happy about that. China's definitely not happy about that. I wonder how the Vietnamese feel about having the Japanese come back and occupy them. How does Indonesia feel about it? How do the Philippines feel about it? You remember, there's a lot of bad blood out there to the Japanese because the last time they did this, they were quite brutal. Millions of Chinese lost their lives. The Koreans were enslaved. The Philippines were brutally occupied, murdered, raped. Same thing with the Vietnamese. So beware of what you ask for. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it is one of those scenarios, I think, geopolitically, historically, and currently, where Japan, it's like not under this arrangement, right? Like we have a situation where yes, the United States is certainly collaborating, cooperating with Japan, pushing it to expand militarily, to wage or to prepare to wage a suicidal war with China. But on the other hand, Japan, when we look at sovereignty, we all respect sovereignty here. We all respect international law. Japan, it would be great if Japan were actually sovereign, but if it were to be independent from its current obligations under this constitution, as you said, Scott, it is not a pretty picture. And I don't know if you could find any government, any nation in that region that would be very excited about that. I think they would not be excited about that because Japan has already shown just in the last few years alone, during the Biden administration, that it is moving in this very dangerous direction.
Remember, they won't even apologize for the comfort to the comfort women.
No, they won't apologize to anyone. They don't apologize to that, to China, to anyone. All these war crimes, including that horrific crime of their colonial past. They have not. You're exactly right. But Scott, do you have any final words? I want to appreciate everyone that gave a super chat. I put you on the screen. I didn't put somebody on the screen, not because I dislike you. I just want to shout out Edward Bernays. But unfortunately, with the censorship going on, unfortunately, your super chat used a few words that we are walking on tightropes here on YouTube. And of course, we have Rumble going in case anything happens. But I want to shout you out, Edward Bernays, for giving a very generous super chat. I'm sorry I didn't pull up your post. But Scott, any final words before we head out of here?
I think I'll emphasize what you just talked about. there's a war taking place right now in the United States. It's an information war, a war of censorship, and the independent podcasters, alternative media figures like Danny and others. Maybe I can be thrown in there. I'm sort of a Johnny come lately by accident, but there's a lot of great people out there. Garland Nixon,
Right.
Danny Haiphong, Judge Napolitano, others that are doing great work, and they're getting censored. Rachel Blevins just had her YouTube channel shut down. Now it's come back, but that's a chilling effect, because now if your whole, remember, none of this happens out of the benevolence of the podcaster. I mean, Danny, last time I checked, you're not independently wealthy. You're not a trust fund child who's out here having a hobby called social media, but it's funded by Danny's money, and you don't have to worry about a damn thing. No, Danny Haiphong works for a living, and this is what he does, and he needs support. And everybody out there, because I see a lot of the names here, I see them on other podcasts, and I think it's great that you follow these podcasts. But if this is how you get your news, if you enjoy this stuff, you got to help sustain this. It doesn't happen on its own, and there's different ways to help. Danny keeps talking about adjusting the algorithm, hitting the like button. Guys, learn about this. Learn how YouTube works. Learn how you need to protect Danny and others like him by making sure that their videos have sufficient visibility to the YouTube algorithms to protect him. And then you also need to sustain him by donating to his Patreon and helping him be able to put the roof over his family, keep his wife and children fed, pay the rent, keep the electricity. And it doesn't happen for free. This is important because we are fighting a mainstream media that has sold out to the establishment. And I'm not saying we're perfect. We do our best. We are fallible, just like everybody else. But any flaws in what we do is not by design. It's a byproduct of the fact that oftentimes we're a one-man shop. We don't have a team of fact checkers. We try, but the difference is the integrity that's part of this. We correct the record where we're wrong. We always strive to do better, and we need your help to continue doing that. So please donate to Danny. Keep this happening. Keep this alive. It's important work. It's what Danny's doing and what others are doing is extremely important. And so if you like the hour and 57 minutes that we gave you tonight, if you found it to be intellectually stimulating, challenging, infuriating, whatever term you want to use, this doesn't happen out of the kindness of Danny Haiphong's trust fund. This happens because he does a lot of work, and he should be, I don't want to say rewarded for that, but he puts in the work, and people need to ensure that he can continue putting in the work by supporting him so that he doesn't have to worry about how he's going to pay next month's electricity bill.
Yeah, and I want to say that this channel has grown incredibly a lot with the help of you, Scott. People love our programs together, and I want to thank everyone because we just reached over 300,000 subscribers. Today was our biggest show ever here on this channel, and one thing that's really important to note, to add what you said, Scott, add on to what you said, is that while YouTube channels can do well and monetization can provide, it's all temporary. When we see African Stream, when we see Rachel Blevins, when we see DD Geopolitics, when we see Scott, I mean, Scott, you were one of the first, in this iteration of repression. We had Mark Sloboda as well. We can go on and on and on. While the channels, Richard Medhurst demonetized permanently, it seems like. I mean, we can go on and on about the examples, but it is temporary, and there has to be ways to support people doing what we do beyond this platform here. So that's why I urge you. So go to Scott's website where you can find all the places to donate to his work, because you come here, Scott. You're on so many shows. I think you did like 20 today. I don't know. I was watching you on on your Winers show. on
You're
Rumble.
probably watching it going, Scott,
You're
9 o'clock, 9 o'clock. You
you were
promised
on
me to be at 9 o'clock.
you were on Jackson's show recently, his new show. You were on you've been on many different programs, even just in a day, but you also write articles. So people should go to your website and support all that work, because it is labor that should be compensated. We just oftentimes don't have employers that will hire us to do that. And then when it comes to what happens here on YouTube, these 300,000 subscribers, I love all of you. I appreciate all of you. I think all of you are on the same journey as we both are, here to try to campaign and win actual peace and be part of this changing world for the better. But it could all go away. YouTube could just say, oh, this is it. So that's why there's Rumble in the video description. But as Scott said, Patreon, Substack, these other arenas where you can fund and support this work are so important, because when it's gone, there is no replacement for something like that. They have a virtual monopoly over this kind of work. So it's important that you do consider the fact that people like Scott, people like myself, people who are doing this work, like Rachel, like African Stream, they need to be compensated for their labor by supporters who truly want to see this work continue. So that's all I want to say, because everyone on Rumble, thank you for watching. Rockfin too. But you go on those platforms, be sure you're there. But also, when we are doing this work, it could all go away, but we're going to continue to do it. If this channel is not here tomorrow, a week from now, whatever, it's going to continue to happen, right? And that's what you've done, Scott. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I'd like to point out, the Substack is the primary way that that I guess I get compensated. But you could subscribe free of charge, because I've made a commitment.
Exactly.
Again, my business manager is furious at me, but I've made a commitment that I will never hide behind a paywall, that whatever I do has to be publicly accessible. But when I did the Substack, I was like, well, I'm going to write 3 articles a week. And people, anybody who subscribes to Substack, they're like, hey, Scott, your last article came out last week. We are a subscriber. Where the hell is your new article? Well, I was supposed to write an article today and get it, and I'm going to try and get it out by tomorrow. But today I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I did 7 podcasts today, because people keep asking me to come on their podcasts, and each podcast is at least an hour. The case of the last 2, I've been talking nonstop since 7 o'clock tonight. 2 hours with the Whiners, 2 hours with Danny, and then you add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's like 10 hours of work, guys.
That's a full work day. Yes.
That's why I didn't get an article done. So sometimes, if I think Substack has to be viewed more than just the article. It has to be viewed as a mechanism to get everything. I'll do better to write. I promise you. I want to write. I have so many ideas I want to write about, but it's hard to write when you're talking.
So don't I know it? I used to write all of the time. I can't find time to do very many articles. Maybe if somebody commissions me for 1 or 2 here and there. But Scott, the fact that you're able to keep this up, I didn't want to reiterate to folks who are supporting Scott or thinking about supporting Scott. Please do understand that Substack on its own as a newsletter is an incredible place to support monetarily or for free, because it offers this ability to keep in touch. It's one of the few of these. Patreon doesn't do it, right? Patreon, if you're a subscriber on Patreon for free or paid, you get similar notifications, etc. But it does not account. It does not keep a list for you. So it's not similar at all to something like Substack, which does something that has become a bygone era. It's gone, where we can actually keep a list of people who are following our work, like the old email lists that a lot of people don't do anymore, and have actually, the corporations have made it incredibly hard to keep, So like Google. But anyway, Scott, given your 10+ hour workday, I think it's time to head out of here. Everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. As you go, you can hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, notifications bell if you have not already. Go to the video description, follow all of Scott's work on his website, support him if you're able. In the video description, all the places to support me as well. Thank you to everyone on Rumble, on Rockfin. Thanks to all the moderators who supported this work on the chat today. And thank you to all the super chats, and of course, all of the viewers. Take care, everyone. I'll be back on Tuesday, actually, with a great show, Laith Maroof and Low Key, to give updates. Who knows what will have happened by Tuesday? So that's the next show. Be sure to subscribe, hit the notifications bell, 1 p.m. Eastern. Take care. Goodbye.